welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm on my way home from work, and thankfully the weather has returned to relative normality for this time of year. It's cold, but we have not got the big storm weather that we've had for the past few days. So hopefully today's trip home is going to be a little bit more pleasant than the trip to work today and the other trips that I've had to do in Peggy recently. My quirk of classic car ownership for you today is how often our cars become so much part of the family they're almost like a pet or similar. When I've been making decisions about going out in the storms and rain and things recently, it's certainly been a difficult decision to make because I've been so worried about anything happening to Peggy in the weather, because if it did, I think I'd be just as kind of sad as a family pet or something getting hurt, because she's really got so much character and plays such a big role in my daily life that she'd be sorely missed if anything did happen. And that leads us on quite nicely to today's topic, which is kind of talking about my experiences of using Peggy at this time of year, and kind of what my thoughts are and if I've got any hints and tips for you. This year is my first winter where Peggy has been out daily. Last year she was used as a daily driver, but unfortunately COVID lockdowns and things like that meant that her daily trips were few and far between, working from home, etc. She was only doing the occasional trip for the food shop and things. So it's been quite a different experience this year to have her having to go out kind of regardless of the time of day and weather and things like that when we need to go out. And it's been much like many things of classic car ownership, an adventure, a learning experience, and there's lots of things that I've learned that I think you'd benefit from hearing about. So hopefully you enjoy today's podcast. The first thing that I've picked up on is that there is so much cleaning to do of your classic car at this time of year. Last year she didn't have to have much cleaning because she wasn't going out that often. A quick kind of rub down and things just before I took her back away, with perhaps some waterless wash and things, would kind of do the job in most cases of her trips out. But this year we've actually had quite a bit of muck and things have to build up because my availability of kind of washing her is limited really to the weekends, given that I'm back in work all the time, and she's having to kind of do the full commute and everything, and so she gets to look quite dirty very quickly, and I'd never really noticed it on any other cars that I'd used at this time of year, but she was very briefly kind of two-tone and things like that with the mud. But it's also pretty important to kind of give them a good wash over every so often to kind of remove salt and things. I'm really becoming very grateful for owning my own pressure washer and things now, to just make sure that the undercarriage is all kind of cleaned off and tidy when she's going out so regularly as she is, and it just helps protect and also kind of keep an eye out for any damage that does crop up. It's an unfortunate side effect, I guess, of using a car, is that stuff can happen and be spotted on your car, and having that kind of couple of hours perhaps on a weekend to go over a car makes all the difference to spotting anything that you're worried about early, and hopefully getting it addressed, or at least kind of watched pretty regularly. I've also obviously had to take her out in various wind recently, but also kind of icy and that conditions, and it does take a bit of getting used to. Driving slowly and more cautiously is certainly the best thing you can do, but also kind of I've had to perhaps adapt to thinking about keeping her a little bit more weighed down, so putting weight and things in the back of the car, leaving things in that are perhaps heavy and useful for using the car at this time of year. But also I tend to fill up with fuel a little bit more frequently at this time of year, just so that the tank stays full and weighted down at the back there, which is quite useful for her being rear wheel drive and kind of keeping the traction and control from the back. Some people go as far to kind of put a bag of potatoes or something in the back of their cars. I've not had to do that just yet, but we've not had any snow or anything, and I'm quite fortunate that I work in a sector that I think if it did snow we would close, so she perhaps won't have to face that too frequently, which is a bonus. But I've heard a lot of people say that actually driving a Moggy in snow is preferable to a modern car because you've got a little bit more control of the thinner wheels and things like that. So I think I'd like to do it at least once just to kind of get that experience. I've mentioned weighing the back down, and weighing it down with useful things at this time of year is certainly a good idea. When I've gone on kind of any long trip, I've made sure that I've got quite a big heavy weighted coat, essentially a big woolen blanket coat that I own in the back, so that if the worst happens, I've got a nice kind of warm coat to wear while I wait for recovery, but also the weight of it, some bottles of water, some snacks and maybe even a flask of a hot drink are all kind of good things to keep with you, just in case you are sat waiting, because sitting and waiting in a classic car or in a lay-by, or sitting and waiting beside a classic car if you're on a busier road without lay-bys and things like that is not going to be the warmest of things to do at this time of year. So definitely worth making sure you're well prepared with kind of blankets and coats and things to keep you nice and warm. Fortunately, when we've had our longest trip this winter, nothing has happened, but it's been good to know that if anything did happen, I've got good recovery cover, but also I've got things to keep me warm and fed depending on how long I'm sat waiting for. Another thing that I've noticed whilst driving Peggy at this time of year is that obviously you're doing a lot more night driving, and other people's headlights, particularly on modern cars, are the most irritating thing you'll have on the road. The brightness of some of the modern headlights is just astounding, and I think it's possibly because I'm sat a little lower in Peggy than some other cars that it just hits me directly in the eyes. So I've actually made sure that my glasses have got kind of the special thing on them that helps with that, but also just being aware that if you're going out on night drives, you're gonna perhaps feel tireder and get eye ache a lot earlier on in your drive than you would if you were driving in daytime, because of that car position and things like that. With some of the adverse weather conditions we've had lately, I've also noticed how kind of unattentive and aware of kind of the impacts of some of these weather conditions on driving that some modern drivers can have. I've had to be kind of quite cautious and careful, not just because I'm driving an older car, but also because the weather conditions are dictating as such, and to see so many modern drivers driving as if like there isn't 70 mile per hour winds, there isn't rain, and that they don't need their headlights on to help kind of be spotted, has been really concerning. And it's made me thankful that actually driving an older car has made me so much more aware and cautious of some of these conditions. I've also been very thankful to have a garage to keep Peggy in, especially with some of the rain and debris and wind that we've seen in the past kind of week or so when the time this podcast goes up. It's been good that kind of I've known she's been safe and tucked away in the garage, because I think every time I'd have heard a rattle or wind blow or anything like that, I'd have been kind of very worried about her. So whilst I perhaps wouldn't mind keeping her out of the garage during some of the summer months, it's certainly been nice to know that she's been tucked away safely during some of the more adverse weather. But equally, I know that some people are more than happy to kind of leave their cars out at this time of year. And I think I probably would if it wasn't for the fact that where I live is so open and we've had some pretty horrendous wind and things flying about near us. So I'm really thankful that we bought a house with a garage really in the end, to keep her nice and tucked away and safe. I've definitely learned during this winter is that I'm most certainly not someone who at the moment would ever want to tuck away Peggy for the winter and go back to driving a modern car, because we've had so many fun adventures and met so many awesome people during these winter months that if Peggy was tucked away and I wasn't going to events or having adventures and things like that in her, I wouldn't have had the chance to do. I don't think I'd have felt as comfortable and kind of happy to do a solo trip for 2 hours both ways, which is what I did just a few weekends back now, in a modern car, just because I find driving Peggy much more kind of involved and helps me keep my concentration on my driving. And also I just find it so much more comfortable than a modern car in terms of the seating position and everything. I'm sure that I could find a seating position in a modern car if I found the right modern car that would be as comfortable. But I do suffer quite badly with like a highway hypnosis sort of thing, which I really don't get whilst I'm driving Peggy for such long distances. So I'm really grateful for her, keeping her out for those reasons. But also we've had some really wonderful adventures with my partner and some other people as well during these winter months that it would have been such a shame to miss out on at this time of year. So it's certainly worth pulling your car out for a few things, like the classic winter meets that I spoke about, like the Christmas adventure that we had just last year, and just generally having nice drives out. I think that driving my classic through winter to and from work has done wonders for my mental health. I know that kind of driving, I know that kind of this time of year can be quite difficult for some people, with the evenings being darker and there being a whole lot less daylight. But having that opportunity to make my commute and hit like sunset and sunrise in my car, and hopefully try and pull over and take a few photos, has really made such a difference to kind of how I felt about my day, having that time to kind of decompress from work, and also kind of just have a little bit of fun in kind of every drive home, because I do have the fortunate position of making my commute across some really beautiful bits of countryside and fenland, so making the opportunities to pull over and take a few photos, especially as I've recently got into doing a bit of film photography, has really made quite a difference to how much I enjoy just the everyday. And so again, just the idea of missing out on those sorts of things makes me really sad. So I can't see that it's going to be something I'm going to do unless my hand is forced in any coming winters. I'd like to have at least one classic that I can use pretty freely throughout the winters. It's also been really good to catch people's reactions to Peggy. They're quite different to kind of in the summer. I've had a lot of people in the summer months come up and talk to me and speak quite nicely about the car and things like that. But actually the winter months, it's been great to kind of spot people out and about enjoying their day, or perhaps not. Just this Saturday, during some of the most horrific weather, I saw some young girls who were out trying to walk with their family to somewhere in the awful weather, and I was just coming back from the gym in Peggy, and while she was absolutely filthy and covered in muck through the rain, you could see these girls peeking out from underneath their raincoats, pointing and looking at Peggy and smiling and talking to each other about her, which was really lovely to see. And also just the other week when I was leaving from work, I pulled up to a junction and spotted two boys filming on their phones, so I made sure to give a nice rev as I pulled off, because it was obviously something that they were interested in, and was something that they were probably going to share with their friends. And having that kind of unusual factor, I guess. A lot of people see classics out during the summer. Talking of which, a Morris Mini's just passed us, so we're not the only ones out today. But yeah, a lot of people see them out in the kind of summer and stuff. But being that kind of car that's out all year round, making people smile and giving them something to talk about, is also a really nice feeling that, again, just wouldn't want to pass up if I can help it. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's podcast, perhaps got some tips and tricks for taking your classic out. The main one is just make sure you hose off the car before you took it back away, if you are going to, but also just make sure that you're doing what you can to keep safe, and having as much fun as you can, because as I've said before, winter is definitely not to be dismissed as a time to have fun with your classics. So thanks again for listening. Drive safely and happy motoring.